right. It is Tuesday, September 12th. It is the beginning of spooky season. What better way to have the beginning of spooky season than me in my new Haunted Mansion shirt and us having an amazing conversation about AI in Gov, because nothing says spooky like extremely new technology in the government workspaces.
It's haunted
Wait, Jay,
technology.
I have a question.
Fire away,
Jay,
Rima.
Did AI do your hair today? Because it's looking very like Conan, very fluffy. I love it. It's looking on point. Great.
Let's go with yes.
Okay.
I definitely used AI to redo my hair today.
Okay.
As usual, we have Jeremy and Rima and Sarah, and then a very exciting show with guests from both the Microsoft side and the government side, which always makes for a good conversation. Hey, before we do that, Jeremy, you want to kick us off with community events?
Yeah, as always, the NARA user group meeting just happened last week, and they had a presentation from the DoD records on the DoD records management strategy by the DOE records manager, which was it was a really great talk. Make sure you get plugged in that group. Link will be in the chat. The DC Power Platform user group will meet on September 13th, which is tomorrow, and their topic is pretty enticing: solving the Elon Musk problem in Dataverse.
Oh, wow.
Which I think is hilarious. So show up to see what they mean.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
The Microsoft 365 meetup for government. Currently, their September event has not been scheduled yet, but their August event was unlocking AI's potential, exploring the exciting world of artificial intelligence. They always have great topics. So it looks like we're all thinking AI right now.
Yep. AI is the topic of everything right now.
It is.
Yeah.
AI is on the brain. So September 14th, M365 DC, that is TBA. August was personal productivity with M365. September 21st is Baltimore SPUG. That is also topic TBA. August was instant vintage power to the enterprise, building bots with Power Virtual Agents.
I didn't know Power Virtual Agents were what's the word I'm looking for again? In vintage already.
Yeah,
right, exactly. Well, I'm thinking
AI
power
as
to the
well.
enterprise. I'm just like, I'm just sitting here thinking Picard is standing there like, maybe he is. We don't know.
Make it so.
You don't know him. September, sorry, not September. October, I reversed these. I'll just do them in the correct order. October 4th through 5th is CS2 Denver, which is a 2-day conference. It's going to take place both in person at the Westin Hotel in downtown Denver, Colorado, as well as virtually. And it's an event for DoD contractors leveraging the Microsoft Cloud who are looking to prepare for CMMC and DFARS compliance.
And I was talking to Scott over at Summit 7. They're also going to have a decent amount of content for education, especially when it comes to educational research in the DoD. So if you're university side, that may be a good one for you to go to as well.
And the next event, I have to concentrate when I say it so I pronounce it correctly, but October 10th through 11th is Shift Happens Conference. Accelerate digital workplace success. Listen, you can't mess that one up. So I can't have another bleep.
Best name for a
It's been a long
conference.
time coming. The last one was pre-COVID, right, Jay?
That's right. If you're curious about what's coming with Shift Happens, I said it really fast. Sorry about that, Debbie. There is a podcast series going on right now with some of the speakers talking about various digital transformation topics. And then there is an entire day, 3 tracks dedicated to AI. So if you're not registered and this conversation today is interesting to you, definitely consider coming to the October 10th and 11th conference. And I'm happy to share more information about it offline. Hit me up on LinkedIn. Well, thanks to the magic of technology, there has not been any delay or setback in the conversation and recording. So with that completely natural transition, Rima, why don't you run through the 221 updates and new items on the Microsoft 365 roadmap, and we'll talk to you in about an hour.
Yeah, I'll be like those medical commercials where they just list out all the different side effects like super fast, right?
Give all the disclaimers.
Yes. I won't. I know I talk fast, but I won't go that fast. Okay, yeah. So for Team Sprawl enthusiasts, so people who love Team Sprawl, because who doesn't, right? Everybody loves it. You'll be glad to know that there's going to be now 1,000 channels per team. 1,000 channels, right? Who doesn't need that? Across GCC, GCC High, and DoD. So that should be exciting to manage, hopefully, for folks. And that, by the way, launched. So that's out there.
That should be available today. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. What's rolling out, what's coming out kind of right now and within the next, couple months or so, is something around Viva Connections. So in Viva Connections, there's now search enhancements, and they're rolling out in the next 60 days in GCC. Then it's going to go to GCC High, and then they'll push search into the team's search bar, so that like search bar up at the top.
Yep.
It seems a little minor for folks. People are like, oh, that's like a small change, but it's the kind of update that you're going to want to tell and educate your users about ahead of time, just to avoid any sort of confusion. So anything new in Microsoft, right? Adoption is key. Make sure you have like your Evangelist, your adoption sort of masters in your organization. Jay knows a lot about that. He talks a lot about that too. So if you ever want to learn more about adoption, definitely hit up Jay. But yeah, so definitely educate your users on that. And then a big one, I think it's a big one, is Teams guest access, which is cross cloud now, meaning like you can have guests that are in different gov clouds. Mind blown, right?
Yeah, that's huge.
Huge. Like that's going to improve productivity across the board. Like I can't even tell you. I know customers have been asking about this for years. Like, so glad that it's here. Anyway, so private preview rolled out in July, and we should start to see this roll out across GCC, GCCI High, and DoD this month. And again, this is going to be huge in terms of cross-cloud government.
We should have a whole conversation about cross-cloud collaboration.
That's a good idea.
Gee, I wonder who came up with that idea.
I think we're doing that next month, as a matter of fact.
I think it's next month.
That is next month, yes.
And finally, there's going to be also some interesting OneDrive releases that I know Jeremy is really a huge fan of, because we were talking about this earlier. It was announced at EduCon Seattle, but now OneDrive is going to have colored folders and a single click, copy link option. So whenever you want to like share that folder link to someone, you'll be able to, just have a single link instead of 2 clicks, right? 1 click is always better than 2, just to be able to copy that link. But again, I know colored folders, huge. I know everybody's been asking for it. No, they have not.
It is
actually the single click thing is really nice.
Right?
Yes,
right.
So
in talking to the team, the number of people who have requested the colored folder enhancement is significantly higher than you would think it is.
Oh, okay. I was going 0.
No, it really no. I don't know any of them personally, but it is pretty interesting. The single click thing though, like if you're sitting there shunning this, tell me you've never clicked share and then been frustrated by the fact that you then have to click share again to copy the URL. Like that one's big.
Yeah, so that's a big one.
Yeah.
Well, things that are in development. One that I thought was interesting was that sensitivity labels are expected to come out for shared channels. I actually didn't know that wasn't there already. So it's interesting when you read through the updates, sometimes the education you get. Because those are pretty important for zero trust in government. If you want to think about how that needs to be used. Also, they're going to be enhancing data lifecycle management by including when items were labeled as a trigger, which will be very useful in the Compliance Center. I wonder if that trigger will work in Power Automate. That would be very interesting.
My understanding too is like if you think about how you want your records to be managed, you're going to manage it for a certain amount of time, maybe since creation or since last update. But then once you hit a certain life cycle action, you probably need to keep it for this amount of time based on that trigger. Like we changed it to final, and once it became final, we needed to keep it for 7 years. Like that's a big thing. Yeah.
Yep. You're telling me there are government organizations that just don't have records management turned on and keep everything instead of trying to figure this problem out?
I can hear the audio break.
Wow, that was really good. That's a really good like simulation. Wow. Jay is an AI bot.
That means we'll have to teach our users how to do it. All right. Well, Viva Insights Manager, leader in advanced insights availability update is coming to GCC. Watch for it in January 2024. Teams webinars in GCC to start to see the on-demand recording feature roll out this month, which is a big deal. And then the Teams meeting joined by meeting ID and passcode, something that Zoom has had forever, It's already in GCC, already in commercial, but it's coming to GCC High and DoD. Am I going to get in trouble for mentioning it?
No.
It's okay,
No,
Remo.
like,
We can have Debbie beep that.
I'm joking.
mention.
I died a little
Oh,
on the
you can
inside.
beep
It's
it
fine.
like it was profanity.
There's like a Z and an S word that we don't talk about.
Oh, wow. Okay.
All right, that's all the updates we're going to talk about. Of the 221, those are the ones we thought were most interesting.
Sarah, tell us about the community.
All right. Well, much like Springsteen wishes that he had Jesse's girl, we have Jesse's blog. That's right. And on Jesse's blog that we've announced, there's a lot of updates there. It covers the roadmap as well. One of the big changes is working hours and location in Outlook for the web, or as we call OWA, or I do,
Nobody calls it that.
for GCC. Well, I do, Jay, so that's not nobody.
Yeah,
That's
and I
actually
gotta
not a
Let
say,
me be
small change.
trendy.
That's
So
not a small change with all the hybrid work environments and needing
No.
to know where people are working from on a given day. That's fantastic.
yeah,
No, it is, especially because I work with people on at this point all over the world, but a lot of that, I'm West Coast, but a lot of them are East Coast, so sometimes people are pinging me and I'm like, why did you ping me at 4 a.m.? So then I
Let me
realized
teach
where
them
they're
about
from.
quiet hours, but please continue.
Right. So coming to GCC in July and then GCC High and DoD in August. And also from the blog, the Windows release health experience is now available for GCC tenants. And we also released a recent blog on protecting and watermarking CAD files in Microsoft
Ooh.
365. Yeah, I know.
Interesting.
That is, yeah.
It is.
I'm used to CAD files being a discussion when it comes to data storage and things along those lines. But I didn't realize watermarking and protecting was a need that hadn't been met yet. So that's really cool.
Hmm.
All right. Well, that was longer than intended and potentially shorter for all of you because of the magic of post-production for this obviously very live show. But I think it's time to get into the real spooky topic and welcome our guests to the screen and audio. And I'm very excited about this. We're going to talk about AI for Gov. Who's not excited about AI for Gov, right? So today on the show, we're bringing Kevin Tupper. Kevin is the federal generative AI evangelist at Microsoft and actually runs the Generative AI for Government newsletter on LinkedIn at aka.ms/genai for Gov, but also runs or is launching, hopefully we're not announcing it too soon, genaiforgov.com, where he's going to provide a little bit more than just the Microsoft corporate line and really get into generative AI. That's super exciting. Kevin, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Appreciate it. And by the way, speaking of spooky magic, what happened with my hair? What should I do? I have a full head.
I don't know about that. Oh, man. And then joining us from the government side, which it's always fun to bring government and industry together to have these conversations, Alastair Thomson. Alastair is the senior advisor on data innovation at ARPA-H, the Advanced Research Projects Agency for Health. Alastair, welcome aboard.
Hey, guys. Thank you. It's great to be here.
Trust me, from both of you, the pleasure is all ours. So as we get into the topic, I thought it might be good to get a little bit more information about you and maybe a little rock, paper, scissors to see who goes first. But tell us a little bit about yourselves. Let's go alphabetical. Alastair, why don't you jump in first? Tell us a little about who you are, what you do, and how you got here.
So I'm from New Zealand, which you can probably tell from the accent, although half of you probably think I'm from England, or worse, Australia. I understand that New Zealand and Australia almost went to war over a game of cricket, so please don't confuse me for an Australian.
I would never call a Kiwi an Aussie. No.
I started out actually in broadcast television. I started a computer graphics company that I ran doing computer animation. I ran an applied research center in computer science at a university in New Zealand before coming to the US, where I worked in just about every industry in existence before sort of landing in biomedical research at NIH in 2001, where I consulted in IT. I became the CIO for one of the institutes, the Heart, Lung, and Blood Institute. And that really got me connected to, biomedical research, sort of hardcore. and sort of led to my transition, which just happened 2 weeks ago, to ARPA-H.
That's really interesting. And I also like the phrase hardcore biomedical research. That's going to become something outside of this conversation. Kevin, tell us a little bit about how you got into your role.
So I'm obviously federal Gen AI evangelist. I've had background in small startups and mid-sized companies. And about 6 or 7 years ago, one of my neighbors was in Microsoft government. Said, when are you going to stop messing around with these little companies and come join a real company?
There it is.
So that was just when the cloud was launching. So I've been a technologist my whole life, trained as an engineer, software engineer, but really also very interested in business. So how do I use technology to solve problems? That's where that really gets me jazzed. And so that's kind of how I got here. And I happen to be a subject matter expert with the Partnership for Public Service on AI. Was about to deliver a talk on generative or on an AI strategy for your next project the week after ChatGPT came out.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
So I basically wiped out my talk and I went to, it was like 55 senior executive service members. And I just said, your world's changed and you don't know it.
Yeah.
Wow.
And it sounded a little bit hyperbole at the time, but I think it's demonstrated itself accurate. And I went back to my manager at the time and said, hey, this is here and we need it. So can I move forward to this? And she said, go. So I've been doing nothing but generative AI for the last 8 months.
That's awesome. And
Nice.
and Alastair, can you talk to us a little bit about how generative AI fits into your role at ARPA-H?
It's really a question of how doesn't it? I think, everything we're doing is involving AI in general, but generative AI in particular, whether it is applying it to things like trying to map out what is going to be an outcome for a patient from their electronic health record, to using it to predict the impact of drugs on a cancer. All of those are being researched and actively pursued, and it's causing just this phenomenal acceleration in scientific discovery, leading hopefully to better health. And you'll see there'll be a lot of things coming out of ARPA-H programs that we'll be launching that involve generative AI in one way or another.
Okay. It's really interesting too, because we've had, Jeremy, you've said time and time again, generative AI is still kind of on the default no-go list for government, as people we're more accepting of machine learning than the generative AI side of things. So it's interesting to have someone who, that's going to be a primary focus for you, it sounds like.
Yeah, I've got a couple of programs that are not announced yet, but will be soon. Generative AI is just key to them, to being able to do what we want to do. And again, as I say, just if what we do works, which we're an advanced research projects agency, which means a lot of what we try doesn't work, but the stuff we do works. The things that we do that work are spectacular in terms of the impact they have. And generative AI, as I say, is at the center of so many of them in so many different fields, from chemical design to understanding health records to data harmonization.
I'm
That's
hoping
wild.
generative AI helps heal bodies. I'm watching the show on Netflix called Travelers, and they have nanites that go inject them in your bloodstream, and they're AI, and they can go heal you. I'm like, yes. Where is that world? I'm just joking.
That sounds like an ARPA project.
Well, Jay, I know you, like you said, we've had a lot of conversations about generative AI and when is government going to use it. And I love that ARPA, as a research entity, is ahead of us all trying to figure it out, so that when the rest of us are ready to tackle it, when we're sure of we have a different risk profile than ARPA does for playing around with stuff. When it gets to that point where we're able to take the risk and leverage it, then it's already been tested.
So how about this? Why don't we kind of get into our questions, because we've got 2 guests today, and so I want to make sure that we answer all these questions with both folks here. So I'll kick things off, and this is a burning question, I think, from a lot of people that I know I've been working with in my role. But really, is how does AI differ from machine learning and large language models? I get that question a lot. I'd love to hear what your thoughts are. I don't know, Kevin, if you wanted to start off first.
Sure, happy to. It kind of, everyone conflates those terms, but they're definitely different. I think you can think of AI as the umbrella of it all. It's very broad, basically. Just if you think a human's doing it and you're assigning that to a device or machine, you can call that AI, right? If it's giving some kind of a device human capabilities. Machine learning would be a subset of that, where you let the machine learn from its own data, and then large language models would be even a more specialized subject or application of machine learning, where you've taken unstructured data and it's really good at generating human-like text and following instructions, which is what large language models do.
Got it. Alastair, I don't know if you wanted to add anything to that. I know it's a pretty sort of...
I think taking a slightly different spin on the terminology, the technical definitions of them are exactly what Kevin sort of said. But I think what I'm seeing is when people see large language models and they think, ChatGPT, what they're thinking about is a very anthropomorphic interpretation of them, that they feel like they're interacting with a human. And yet AI is just so much broader than that. Just basic classification of images, which is heavily used in biomedical imaging to automatically, detect cancers and things. Nothing to do with large language models, nothing to do, extremely advanced. And you might not feel like that you're interacting with a human, but they're still classified as AI.
Interesting. That's a good point. Good point. Thank you.
And I'll kick off the next question, and I'll, start in reverse. So with Alastair first. And by the way, kia ora. I went to New Zealand.
Gosh, how far?
I went to New Zealand over 10 years ago, was traveling with a singing group, and I visited the Maori Cultural Center. But anyways, so moving on from that, a lot of people are talking about like the conversations around AI, especially in the social platforms, are all over the place, and people keep thinking that it's going to be like, I've seen references to the Terminator a lot, which is nowhere what we're trying to do or what's going to happen. But because of all of this fear mongering and whatnot, how do we ensure ethical use of AI? How are we doing it now? The future, like what are the plans and what's being talked about for that?
So I think you've got to think about ethical use of AI along multiple dimensions. So one is actually how it gets applied. So you can use generative AI, whether it's the sort of generator models that like ChatGPT, or diffusion models for imaging like DALL-E. You can use those for misinformation. Mm-hmm. There's that side of ethical use of AI, and that really is a human social factor that we've got to figure out how we deal with. It's a policy question, potentially regulatory, potentially intractable. But on the other side of it, we've got questions like equity. And so one of the core parts of ARPA-H's mission is to make sure that anything we develop in healthcare is equitable, that it's impacting everyone. We all know that during the pandemic, minorities were incredibly badly devastated by COVID compared with wealthier, whiter communities. And there's a real risk in AI, particularly generative AI, of exacerbating inequities. Some of that comes from, the training data. So if you train a model on data that's biased, doesn't have any data from, Native American populations, for instance, then guess what? It's not going to deal with those things. And it's going, if you're not really cognizant of it and planning for how you're going to deal with it, it is going to make things worse. And so a lot of what we're doing is looking at, as we design programs that are using AI, how do we ensure we have the participation from the communities that are potentially at risk from this? Not just participation in the research, but participating in the governance of it. Who's making the decisions about how they're used? We need minorities involved. We need the LGBTQ community involved in discussing it, because the harms are real. I don't want to overstate them, But if we don't think about them and be cognizant of them constantly, then it is going to negatively impact real people.
I love how you approach that, Alastair, because if you're using other people's models, you have different concerns than if you're generating models yourself. And so, Microsoft obviously has been deep in this area of ethical AI and responsible AI for quite some time. We've had responsible AI standard 1. Now we have responsible AI standard 2, particularly with what we've learned from 1. And I think we could probably throw those links somewhere at some point in time. Which they're publicly available, and it's taken an intentional and iterative approach into all of our products, especially the co-pilots and those sorts of things. And as creators of that technology, it's incumbent on us to make those kinds of careful choices so that technology is beneficial for everyone and not just for a particular group, right? And it's equitable outcomes. And all of that's kind of built into the standard. All those commitments to principles and things like that are part of our responsible AI. But more importantly, we're adding tools to enable the people who are developing derivative products on top of this technology to do the same sort of things, right? So you have to do all those mitigation layers yourself. If you're taking generative AI models from any big provider of a large language model, let's say, and you're putting that out to the public or whoever internally, even, you need to think about what are the harms and then bring your own measurements of what are the outcomes that we're trying to drive or deliver, and then put the specific mitigation layers in to make sure you're delivering that, particularly on a rapidly emerging technology like this. I don't want to overstate, by the way, the harms, as Alastair was saying, because the nice thing to me, there are so many valuable things that government can get that is low-hanging fruit, low risk, high value that they can get from this, that just, I don't want to say eliminates the need for that, but it does significantly reduce the amount of work that has to go into doing risk mitigation, because it's just the harms are just not at the same level versus, say, a public chatbot.
Yeah, I think it's important to recognize that mitigation is never going to be perfect. You're never going to eliminate bias from models. So it's critical that you put in place tools to measure the bias so that you can be informed about it and you're not just blindly following. Again, some of the things that we're planning in new programs, they've got components which do research on how do we measure bias in an impartial way, and then report on that and represent that to real people, so that when they're being guided by generative AI, they can see where the biases are, what the risks are, and that they can be informed to make the best decisions for their health.
I was going to say, I participate with an organization in DC called ACT-IAC. I think, Alastair, you might do that as well. And one of their white papers they produced was specifically on this topic of how can we ensure transparency and certification of our models, so that people will know if there are biases, they were on purpose and these are what they are, or that we've considered the elimination of biases and we can certify our mitigation standards that we put in place to reduce it. So where do we stand? I'm in government, Alastair's in government. We all kind of care about the government environment. That's what we talk to here with this podcast. Where do we stand in ensuring the protection of sensitive information when we start interacting with AI? Kevin, how about you take a shot at that?
So yeah, this is a like myth busting moment, because everybody's concerned. Well, isn't my data going to go into the model? And the nice thing is, if you're using it in Azure with OpenAI, our privacy policies are clear. They haven't changed. With sensitive information, protective that information. Your data is your data is your data is your data. It doesn't go into the model. It doesn't have data leakage. It's isolated to your Azure tenant. The same thing, the sensitivity controls you had mentioned earlier, Jeremy, I know at the start with Microsoft 365, those sorts of controls should be applied in your data. And so when we think about solutions, particularly with generative AI from a zero trust environment, you start outside of the AI model and you have your security and privacy controlled prior to that, so that the model never gets access to anything that a person doesn't have access to.
That's really interesting. And it's also, when you look at the question around sensitive information, and you're looking at what does the system have information to, but also like what does the system have information to that it's learning from other places. Like when you use something like ChatGPT, anything you put in that can become accessible outside of your data environment. Whereas when you look at something like Azure OpenAI, one of the reasons you're using a system like that is because you're trusting that is keeping your data to your environment and not sharing it with other government agencies or commercial space, et cetera. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, I think recognizing that is critical, because it's going to get over, I think, the no, thou shalt not use it. My previous life, one of the last things that I did there was to have one of our development teams actually use Azure OpenAI API in a private, firewalled way as it's provided, to provide a ChatGPT equivalent to our researchers in the intramural program. And so they're now piloting that now. They love it. They think it's absolutely wonderful. It doesn't have some of the nuances that you get from ChatGPT or things like GitHub Copilot, where it can do code and things, which is often where they want to use it.
Mm-hmm.
But we're enabling them to use it. We're enabling them to see what it can do, and start to learn about things like bias and other things. Because I think that there's a fear of unfounded fear of how the data is going to be used, and we recognize that we've got to get this in the hands of scientists to be able to explore it as fast as they possibly can. Because I've said this again and again. This is game-changing technology for biomedical research and healthcare. We have to figure out how to use it safely.
Alastair, if I could add on to what you're saying, appreciate it, because I've been delivering that message across multiple agencies to say we have a shadow IT nightmare developing, because it is, everybody knows, when my child comes home and I'm helping them on their homework with ChatGPT, I'm like, I got this email that I need to summarize. Maybe it can help me with that. And, I talked to one CTO, and he basically said he knows his people are using it. He just hopes they're not doing anything stupid. Hope isn't a great strategy, as we all know. So what we're recommending for almost everybody is set up a sandbox with Azure OpenAI and what we have called GovChatGPT or something like that, which we have a starter repo for a clone, just so that you can have a isolated environment to start testing and learning. Because part of AI literacy is not learning about it, it's learning to, right? And as you were just saying, you've got to get your hands dirty. You've got to see how does it respond when I ask it this kind of question, particularly if you're trying to use it for any kind of a solution. You need to understand how it functions.
That's a great idea. Jay?
Yeah. And it's so interesting too, because my wife is an educator, and she is now having to she's an English teacher, specifically a professor in college, and she is having to not just make sure people are using grammar accurately, or not just treating by copying language from somewhere, but now are they using ChatGPT or other tools to write their papers. And so that's become, an additional thing. So like you said, your people are using it. And in order to make sure they're using it safely and correctly, we have to educate. We have to test, and then we have to educate people on how to use it, and frankly, how not to use it. Right. So
I think in government, we can't just say, no, you can't use it. We've got to offer an alternative. My philosophy has always been, I won't say no.
Right.
I will advise you on the risks until such time as I have a viable alternative that you can use. Then I can say, no, you got to use this.
Yeah.
Yes, it might not be as all bells and whistles as the latest thing from OpenAI, but it's got 99% of what you need, and it's safe.
Yeah, yes, and is huge when we come to something like this, because the minute you say no, they go do it anyway. But if you say yes, and here are the risks of using the open system, meanwhile, we're testing this closed system, which will protect what we're trying to accomplish, right? So
making the argument to them, so do you want to put your latest research out there that's not published yet? So
right.
The answer is almost always no, I don't.
Yeah. Oh, I didn't realize that's what was happening. Oh, now we had that conversation. So let's dig into there a little bit more. Alastair, you've given some hints as to how NIH was using AI and testing it. Kevin, what have you seen in the industry where people are actually using AI? What kind of use cases are you seeing them use it for?
So elephant in the room, M365 Copilot is not GCC yet. And so the largest use case is that we're seeing is basically chat over your data. So there's a service called Azure OpenAI on your data. And what we're doing from a government perspective is we have a couple of repos that we're helping customers hook that up to their own SharePoint repository so that they can begin to do the kinds of things that you would expect Copilot to have with their own data, just so they can start to ask questions and experiment and learn how this works. And then the other is we're finally starting to see some use cases that are what I'm calling guidable agents, where they're low-hanging fruit, where what most people, and to me, it's actually the larger, more valuable context than just chat. And it's like the bottom 2/3 of the iceberg, where you can take these large language models and say, here's a document, go extract these 17 key value pairs from this natural language document, unstructured text, and give them to me in a JSON payload. And then you can actually once you work on your prompts and get it working the way you want and test it, now you have something that you can automate, something that's very mundane that a human could look at that document and read it and put them in a JSON document. Now you can just basically put that in a pipeline and run it at scale across a large set of documents, and then take that JSON and put it, say, in a line of business application. And so those are, to me, super low risk, right? Depending on the line of business application, very low harm opportunity. Very grounded prompt, very narrow scope. So it's not like it, and the prompt doesn't change. Once you codify it, it's not a free form where a human can come in and change it. And so those are the kinds of, there's lots of cases like that where we're seeing automation of prompts against data sets.
Like productivity and efficiency, right? In government. Yep.
Yeah, actually, I saw you also shared on LinkedIn recently an example, or maybe Alastair, I think you shared it actually, the example of where prompts can go wrong. It is pretty wild. Like, depending, you can ask what seems a completely simplistic prompt, but end up getting complete bias around that. So that kind of testing becomes very important.
Yeah, the example was using generative image creation to make various images of Barbie, since it's very topical. And that, the African Barbie who happened to be carrying a rifle, where did that come from?
Wow.
Yeah, it was, yes, it's fascinating. It's a very good cautionary tale. So in terms of other ways that we're using it in this extremely live and real time thing, it's Tuesday, right? So tomorrow, you will hear an announcement about a program as part of the Cancer Moonshot. I don't want it to get too far ahead of the White House on it. And part of that is using about using generative AI for data exploration and data harmonization. The problem with scientific data today, most of it gets generated and it's not particularly usable. Right. Nor is it easy to find things. And in fact, to find data, you have to know where the data is, which repository run by which organization. You need to know something about the data, what variables are in it and what's the structure of it in order to be able to query it. And that's just, if you're talking about bringing multiple data together across, multiple data domains and silos, it's just impossible, or it takes a very, very long time. Wouldn't it be great? Imagine if you could just query it and saying, I've got a scientific hypothesis that, some molecule is going to regulate cancer growth. Show me where the data is that can let me test the hypothesis of whether that molecule will work. And by the way, here's some publications that, reference this, and then have it go and find all the data. And so that's the kind of world that we're trying to create. There's very concrete uses of generative AI. It needs more than just what, ChatGPT or Azure OpenAI provides you. You've got to have other data sources in there, other knowledge graphs to be able to link it. And so that's another area where we're going to be pushing forward research, is how we link very specific data, potentially using a variety of AI models, not just large language models, in order to, for instance, do prompt engineering using specialized machine learning models on specific domains to inform the generation of the prompt and then focus it. I had the pleasure actually going out to Seattle and meeting with the Microsoft team and understanding more of how they're doing prompt engineering in some of the products that are coming up. And I think it inspired us that, it is possible to do the things that we're talking about. But it's going to take some research. So keep an eye out for the announcement on that.
To say there are a number of use cases across government for AI in general, machine learning. The VA has a artificial intelligence institute that they established a couple of years ago. So those are places that even have a public portal where people can see what government's doing. Government has lots of data, right? Look at someplace like, say, Department of Transportation. They have lots of data on roads and accidents and cars and all kinds of stuff. And they've had a lot of success in using machine learning and AI to parse that data, looking for trends, looking for things that can lead to, say, public good in a recall or public good in areas that need some investment, infrastructure investment for roads or bridges and whatnot. So I would say there are a large number of use cases, and I'm very excited as Alastair and Kevin talk about generative AI as the next phase, because it's got kind of that interactive capability where you can ask it questions, refine the model on the fly, rather than having to build your model in some specialized tool set and apply it to your data.
I'm hoping that all applies to GW Parkway also in the DC area, by the way. Just kidding. So, I mean, all of this sort of to kind of ask my next question, which is around what challenges, and I know we've mentioned a little bit about this, but what are the biggest challenges, I should say, around encountering and evaluating AI use cases? Like what's sort of the pushback? Like what are you seeing? How what's the feedback that you're getting right now?
Obviously, it seems like Alastair has no problem getting those cases moving, because I'm excited to just listen to what he's saying.
I know, I'm seeing your face as he's talking, and you just keep being like we all are, but you're like it's great.
If I could take you with me across the rest of the federal space, I'd be like, see.
Right.
It is I think literacy and fear. First, I would say that AI is not new, right? Government has been working in AI. There's been AI winters. It's been going on since the 50s. So this is not a new thing. The problem is that ChatGPT came out and captured the attention of the world. And all kinds of what I call hanger-on headlines of people basically that were writing completely irresponsibly just to get clicks because they want to make money. Mm-hmm. Has nothing to do with the technology. And it just grates me when I see a journalist asking a question that showed they didn't put any effort at understanding what it actually does, and create sensationalism. So that puts fear in the headlines of administrators, agency administrators who don't understand this.
Right.
And so you see those reactions of, okay, stop, right? Especially with generative AI, like you said at the beginning, Jay, there's in some places it's just blanket. No, we're not going there.
Right.
Mm-hmm. And unfortunately, it's just what we have to work with around it. And I think there's the people like Alastair and other places who understand it really well, who, it just is going to take time to get that to filter through, and just overall raising the literacy effort. So, Rima, I'm not sure if that's how I would answer your question. There are the ones who are ready to move forward in a safe, responsible way. And I do appreciate the actual reticence too, right? Because the last thing you want to do is turn on, say, I was talking with somebody today who was thinking about pitching government on a public chatbot. I said, hold on. When you got to think of all of these, if you're going to put that out there, you need to think of mitigation. Mm-hmm. Trust me, even though you think everyone today goes to this forum and asks for this information, that bot is going to go onto Reddit, and somebody's going to come in and say, let me ask these 7 questions and see if I could break it. Yep. And now publish something that says XYZ agency just told me, boom, boom, boom. Right. And and so rightly so, government is cautious in the right areas, and it is learning how have that risk framework to adopt and how they should do it responsibly. So really no complaints, although I would love to take Alastair with me across to all my meetings.
Yeah.
Did we just create new best friends right now? I think we did. So like
I think when you talk about risk framework, that's the most critical thing here. There's some places I do not want generative AI used right now. So nuclear missile targeting, I think, is probably a poor use case for it. Not optimal. But recognizing that there are cases where risk is worth taking. But the problem is that I think we in government are generally pretty bad at assessing risk and pretty bad at deciding when we should use things. Maybe we should ask ChatGPT to assess it. No, maybe not.
I'm sure it'll just tell you to trust it. It's fine.
Yeah, of course. But, we're an ARPA. We're designed to take risks. That's the whole point of what we're doing. And so what we're doing is pushing the edges. We're pushing the edges so that others can learn from it and not be afraid of it. And know which use cases are the good ones to do it. Deciding what vegetables to grow in the Army's farms is whatever is great. Not nuclear missiles, please.
So that brings up an interesting point, because you've asked about restrictions and limitations and challenges, and I would say one of the benefits of generative AI is it can consume a lot of data and then let you interact with it. One of the challenges government's going to have is, because of our risk approach, it's only going to be my agency's data, but there may be 18 other agencies who have some part of a mission in the same space with great data. And so we're going to really need to start talking about how do we come together to create government's databases of this data where we all can get the benefit of the AI examining that data and providing us all opportunities to query it from our own point of view.
Do you mean a type of cross collaboration?
Some sort of type of cross collaboration.
Over the last 20 years, the government's done a great job of making data more available inside shiny silos that don't talk to one another. We've got to break that down. This is just even more so with AI, because so how do we deal with bias? You enlarge the scope of the training data, the data that's available. You have to be able to get the data equitably. And it's not just across government. It's across academia. It's across industry. It's in communities that we don't normally reach. And we've got to deal with issues like sovereignty over data. So a tribal nation is not going to want to hand over the data to the government for training a giant AI model. But they might be interested in participating using federated learning kind of techniques where they keep control over their data and they can see how it's being used.
Or using a large language model to preserve their language and heritage.
Ooh.
Yeah. It's a really good example.
Nice.
That's cool.
By the way, Inside Shiny Silos is the name of my new indie cover band. So I'm going to remember that. And the next question is, I know you might be limited on how you can answer this or what you can answer with. It's Kevin, but what Microsoft AI services should we expect to see available in GovTenants? And what types of differences should we expect between worldwide and government? Whatever capacity you can answer that in, I understand.
Loaded question. I would, as speculation, speaking it just as somebody who's seen it happen, I would expect pretty much the things that you're seeing coming out to the commercial space eventually to make their way into government. Just I couldn't speculate on which ones wouldn't or wouldn't, but it's really comes down to GPUs, investment, capital investment, and whether the government actually needs or wants it in enough scale to warrant the investment. Right? That's the thing. But all the kinds of co-pilots that we're seeing, it's all using the same underlying model with mitigation layers on top of it within the co-pilots. So I'd expect all those to come. I think they've definitively announced that Copilot for GCC will come, Microsoft 365 Copilot. I just don't have a specific date.
It's like a field of dreams right now. If you build it, they will
A little bit.
Well, and it's still
Yeah.
got the same, like
Backwards
we were
on
just
that.
talking, though, it's still going to have that data challenge, right? If it's only my agency's data, it's going to have all the inherent biases of my agency's perspective of the world.
Right.
Yeah.
And
It's
isn't there something
interesting too
about
that
I just want to, I'm going to hit this again just because it's a pet
Please.
peeve of mine as my title, Evangelist.
yes,
Right. The real value is, I shouldn't say the real value, a major portion of the value, the lion's share, which, by the way, some would say the lion's share is everything because that's what's going to be taken when they get there.
Mhm.
But
Right.
the vast amount is these guidable agents, right? Where you can actually take generative AI and set it to do tasks for you on your behalf.
right.
That's where, that's where we can take humans and free them up to actually do things that AI can't do. Where like, you know what, I no longer have to do this task that I've been spending 20 hours of my week, which is just mundane, it's mindless. Now I can have an agent do that after it's been built and properly tested and all the other things we talked about. Now I can actually solve some real problems.
Yeah.
Because governments can have the same problem we're seeing everywhere, more with less, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
I
And we're
mean, it's-
inundated with information these days, and it's so
Help
hard
me
to
summarize.
sort through it all.
One of the easiest use cases for the everyday user, right, of Microsoft 365 is going to be when Copilot can help you summarize meetings and summarize large documents that have come your way. On the sales side, I know that we are using ChatGPT and Bing Chat and other systems, public AIs, to review public government documents to summarize the government's position on zero trust and AI and other things like that. I've personally had the opportunity to use Copilot to review a meeting that I had with someone and give us the action items. Like, so not having to re-listen to 2 hours of meetings to make sure we
Right.
didn't miss anything, but actually see who said something, what was the action that came out of it, and in some cases, who did we suggest we talk to about it? Like, so some really cool, I'm going to call them low-level examples because they're going to be the common person's use of the tool set.
Right. That's very ADHD friendly if you think about it too. Like, because it's going to help you do, like, you can't be inundated with too many tasks if you're like trying to pay attention in a meeting, like,
Yeah.
and taking notes. It's helpful and saves time. I'm like having flashbacks now to like doing my research paper in grad school and all the wasted hours.
Yes. So a couple of summary points from what I've heard today. One, generative AI is available in government in some forms. The Azure AI, Azure OpenAI is FedRAMP, so you if your agency allows, you can start using that sort of thing today. There are another point. There are agencies using AI, not just machine learning, but AI today. And if you're curious who, reach out to Alastair on LinkedIn, and he can give you some of those examples that we've talked about today. And more is coming. We don't have exact release dates yet. Darn it, Kevin, I thought we'd get you to slip. But more is coming to the government clouds. Some of it's limited by policy, some of it's limited by security verification, and frankly, and you kind of slipped this in there, some of it's limited by the number of graphic processing units that are available to us today, because that's really, you need a lot of GPUs to be able to do open language AI processing. So what did I miss?
It's important to recognize, though, that GPT 3.5 and GPT 4, which is what Azure OpenAI has, you don't need that for many, many tasks in generative AI. You can use much smaller models that are much more efficient, some of which, you don't actually need a GPU to run them. There was some recent research published that looked at using an open source llama model, one of the very small ones with 7.5 billion parameters instead of the hundreds of billions that are in GPT-4 for specialized biomedical work, and it performed better than GPT-4 and was able to run on a very small low-end GPU equipped virtual machine in the cloud.
That's awesome. I put it in the chat here, but hopefully you'll be able to share a link to that as an example to help people start, figuring out what to use themselves. So we've had you talking for quite a while, and I thank you for that, because this has been super exciting for me, and I imagine for those of our listeners on LinkedIn and YouTube there. But Kevin, Alastair, how can people find more of what you're saying, more about you? How can they get in touch with you?
Alastair?
For me, LinkedIn. That's where you will hear me opine on things. You'll see me share, what's going on at ARPA-H as we launch new programs. There's a lot happening, and it's just, I find that a good way to communicate with the people that understand what we're doing and why we're doing it.
Yeah, and same for me. LinkedIn is pretty much predominantly where I'll be sharing insights and learnings and Gen AI for gov.com, of course.
Awesome. Alastair, Kevin, thank you both so much for joining us today. We look forward to hearing more from both of you, and of course we obviously look forward for seeing more from Microsoft as it continues to expand the capabilities. For those of you who want to reach out to them, you now know how to learn more from Kevin and Alastair. And if you're excited about our next conversation on the M365 Government Community Call, we will have John Peluso talking about cross-domain, cross-cloud collaboration. So lots of good stuff coming up. Gentlemen, team, thank you so much for a great episode.
Yes, thank you. It was great.
Thank you all.